Max Verstappen won the Qatar Grand Prix, but the FIA just revealed shocking post-race evidence. Red Bull made a setup change so extreme, rival teams thought the car wouldn't survive the race. The FIA says it was legal, barely. But it gave Verstappen a razor-thin advantage no one saw coming. Subscribe now, because what happened in Qatar might not just decide the title, it could change the sport. The Qatar Grand Prix ended with Verstappen on the top step, but the race did not close the story. It opened it. Hours after the podium celebrations faded, the FIA released new post-race findings that immediately sent shockwaves through the paddock. Their technical breakdown confirmed that Red Bull had run Verstappen's RB21 with a configuration so aggressive, it pushed every limit of what a modern Formula One car can endure at a circuit as demanding as Lusail. Before the FIA release, most believed Red Bull had simply outplayed McLaren on strategy. The early safety car, the perfect undercut, the tire management, it all looked like high execution within normal parameters. But the data told a more dramatic truth. Red Bull had taken a suspension approach that increased mechanical load on the rear tires to a level that would normally destroy performance. Engineers from rival teams called the numbers reckless. The FIA revealed them as calculated. What made the revelation so explosive wasn't the legality. The FIA confirmed immediately that Red Bull did not break any rules. But they walked right up to them. The adjustments made after qualifying, which cost Verstappen grid positions, created a rear platform that maximized speed through Qatar's fast directional changes at the expense of tire safety. The reason it worked was not technical genius alone. It was Verstappen's ability to manage a configuration few drivers would dare to race with. The FIA's telemetry findings showed that Verstappen held the RB21 in a narrow operating window that most drivers would lose within minutes. The car demanded constant micro-corrections, earlier turn-ins, and precise throttle pressure. Verstappen's driving kept it alive through the toughest phases of the race, where track temperature surged and wind shifts destabilized the balance of nearly every car on the grid. He made a setup designed for instability operate like a stable platform. McLaren and Ferrari engineers reacted with disbelief after the FIA briefing. Their models predicted that Red Bull's configuration should have triggered rapid rear left degradation long before the halfway mark. Verstappen's data showed the opposite. His degradation curve remained linear. He preserved tire integrity through techniques that the FIA described as unusually disciplined for a race with this level of environmental punishment. It was not a story of pace. It was a story of mastery. This new information reframed Qatar entirely. Verstappen had not simply capitalized on McLaren's hesitation during the safety car. He had executed a race that demanded complete trust in Red Bull's risk-heavy setup and total confidence in his own ability to keep the car inside a narrow survival margin. It was a win that now looks less like strategy and more like a controlled leap across a technical chasm. And with the championship coming down to one final race, these FIA revelations carry weight far beyond Qatar. They show that Verstappen is willing to take risks that others avoid, and Red Bull is prepared to give him a car that demands elite precision to succeed. It raises the stakes for Abu Dhabi. It raises the fear inside McLaren. And it raises the question every fan is thinking. Subscribe now, because if Qatar was this dramatic, the finale may be historic. Heading into the Qatar Grand Prix, McLaren was in control. Lando Norris led the championship standings. Oscar Piastri was within striking distance. Their car had shown strong long-run pace throughout practice, and both drivers looked poised to extend their advantage before the season finale in Abu Dhabi. For Red Bull and Verstappen, this was supposed to be damage limitation, a weekend to survive, not to win. Verstappen's RB21 hadn't impressed on Friday. The car struggled for balance in medium-speed corners and was visibly uncomfortable over curbs. Sector times were inconsistent, and Red Bull mechanics were seen making suspension tweaks between every session. Ferrari and McLaren had better mechanical grip and more confidence in the long runs. Verstappen wasn't even in the top two in outright race pace simulations. Then qualifying changed everything. Red Bull made the call to brake park firm and take a grid drop in exchange for a radical rear-end setup adjustment. Verstappen would sacrifice starting position, but gain a more aggressive, rear-stable car. It was a bold move, one that had to pay off in tire life and strategic flexibility. It wasn't designed to win the race in the first stint. It was designed to win it in the last 20 laps. Sunday's race opened calmly, but the tension was underneath. Norris led cleanly. Piastri followed. Verstappen sat behind in a car still feeling edgy in the early phase. But then, the moment came. A collision between Hülkenberg and Gasly on lap 7 brought out the safety car. Where McLaren hesitated, Red Bull reacted instantly. Verstappen dove into the pits. It was a split-second decision that changed the race's architecture. By switching to a fresh set of hards and resetting his tire strategy, Verstappen was no longer on McLaren's schedule. He was creating his own. The early stop gave him an undercut window that McLaren never truly closed. Piastri and Norris stayed out too long, locked into their pre-race plan. Verstappen had already torn up his script and he now had track position as the race restarted, with a cleaner balance and fresher tires. The brilliance wasn't just in the decision, it was in the execution. Verstappen didn't immediately charge. He measured his pace, matched deltas, and protected tire life. His team fed him live data, Piastri's laps, Norris's wear, and the timing for the second stop. Verstappen absorbed it all and stayed one move ahead. McLaren, stuck reacting, found themselves 2 steps behind. The undercut was not sudden. It was constructed lap by lap. And now, with the FIA's technical release confirming just how close Verstappen's car was to the edge of legality and reliability, we understand the full risk of that setup decision. Red Bull didn't just win Qatar. They engineered a win from a compromised starting point, relied on Verstappen to drive perfectly inside a narrow margin, and exploited McLaren's rigidity. What was once seen as a routine victory is now something very different, a calculated, high-stakes maneuver that may have saved Verstappen's title hopes. The FIA's official post-race data from Qatar gave us more than just confirmation of legality, it gave us insight into the full scope of Red Bull's execution. From the first lap after the safety car restart, Verstappen was on a different operating curve than his competitors. Not faster by raw lap time. Not even quicker in corner apex speeds. But more efficient, more measured, and more predictive. His stints weren't about pushing, they were about sculpting a race others couldn't see coming. Lap time charts released in the FIA summary show Verstappen ran a near-perfect delta curve between laps 10 and 40. His variance per lap? Less than 0.2. That kind of stability in the middle third of the race was unprecedented under Losail's degradation-heavy conditions. While McLaren's times oscillated due to tire drop-off and reactive pace shifts, Max remained constant. It was this consistency, not outright pace, that cracked the field open. Another critical data point was tire wear. According to the FIA's thermal degradation report, Verstappen's rear left tire, which should have degraded fastest due to track layout, lasted 11% longer than Piastri's on average. That margin translated into 1 extra lap per stint. In a race with mandatory multiple stops and tire life caps, gaining just 1 lap of usable performance meant Verstappen could delay stops, avoid traffic, and time his undercut to perfection. That wasn't a driver pushing harder. It was a driver pushing smarter. Telemetry overlays confirmed the hidden difference. Verstappen's brake release phase in medium-speed corners was smoother than any other driver's. He wasn't simply braking earlier, he was modulating deceleration over longer distances, reducing energy spikes into the rear axle, and lowering thermal load. It's a technique that minimizes tire overheating while preserving corner exit stability. On a car running with a stiffened rear like the RB21 in Qatar, that was essential to avoiding tire collapse. Even throttle data showed Verstappen playing a long game. He never asked the car for torque in unstable phases. Coming out of turn 6 and turn 10, his throttle traces were progressive and deliberate, avoiding traction losses. McLaren and Ferrari drivers spiked the throttle in bursts, Verstappen applied it in ramps. These ramps not only kept his tires alive but helped the RB21 rotate gently, staying in balance with less steering correction and fewer microslides, reducing cumulative wear over the race. Energy deployment was just as clinical. The FIA showed Verstappen harvesting in places others deployed. While some drivers used battery and non-passing zones for time gains, Max focused on targeted ERS bursts on the main straight, and the exits of turns 4 and 10. He wasn't defending. He was building. That stored energy made his in-lap before each pit stop stronger and his out-lap cleaner. In races where track position is gained through margins, Verstappen was carving those margins with systems thinking, not sheer aggression. Ultimately, what the data revealed is that Red Bull's win wasn't just the result of a smart call during the safety car. It was the product of a layered strategy, one that began with a controversial setup change, was executed through Verstappen's calculated driving, and only worked because both driver and car operated at maximum coordination. The FIA's release didn't expose a breach. It exposed a masterclass. Red Bull's decision to stiffen the RB21's rear end ahead of the Qatar Grand Prix was not just bold, it was surgical. Most teams went softer in the rear to absorb Lusail's harsh curbs and reduce sliding under traction. But Red Bull did the opposite. They increased rear suspension rigidity, sacrificing mechanical comfort for aerodynamic consistency. The move was high risk. It demanded elite-level driver control. But if Verstappen could adapt, the reward would be a car that remained stable at high speed, with less aerostall and more corner exit traction. Verstappen didn't just adapt, he reprogrammed his style. His corner entries were more deliberate, initiating rotation earlier in the braking phase to let the car settle mid-apex. That way, he could avoid loading the stiff rear under throttle. In low-speed corners like turn 10, he coasted slightly longer and applied throttle more progressively, smoothing out weight transfer. The result was a car that rotated cleanly and avoided excessive tire scrub, a key advantage over rivals suffering rear degradation. The brake bias management across stints was a textbook example of Verstappen's in-race engineering mindset. Early in the race, he used more forward bias to keep rear tire temps under control, reducing instability under braking. As the fuel load lightened, he gradually adjusted rearward, helping the car pivot into medium-speed corners like turn 6. These micro-adjustments were not done via team instruction. Verstappen managed them in real time based on feel and tire feedback, keeping the car neutral and efficient. The FIA's released steering telemetry provided another layer of insight. Verstappen's steering angle remained consistent throughout all stints, even as tire wear increased. That's rare. Most drivers increase input angles mid-race to compensate for understeer and tire loss. Verstappen didn't need to. He maintained clean entries and minimal correction, a sign that he wasn't chasing the car, he was guiding it. The stiff rear end setup only worked because Verstappen kept the platform perfectly balanced through natural inputs, not corrections. The RB21's differential settings also played a key role. Verstappen adjusted diff entry and exit values mid-stint to control traction and rotation. Early in the race, he loosened diff exit to help the rear rotate naturally. Later, when the tires began to drop, he tightened settings to regain traction under throttle. This level of control is rare. It requires a driver not just to understand how the diff affects handling, but to match those changes with real-time driving style without destabilizing the car. One of the most overlooked elements was engine braking. Verstappen used aggressive engine braking settings in Sector 2 to slow the car without leaning heavily on the physical brakes, helping reduce rear lockup risk and saving energy deployment. In Turn 4, this technique helped the RB21 stabilize mid-corner, allowing Max to go to throttle earlier without unsettling the rear. Other drivers relied more on mechanical braking, which increased heat in tire where Verstappen relied on coordination. By the final stint, Verstappen's RB21 looked deceptively smooth on track, but only because of how precisely it was being driven. The stiff rear end, the neutral balance, the diff tuning, the brake bias shifts, none of it worked in isolation. Verstappen synchronized every component of the car's behavior into a unified race rhythm. Red Bull gave him a car that could win only if it was handled with surgical precision. Verstappen didn't just handle it, he turned it into a championship-caliber weapon.